Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, evading sanctions via smugglers. A recent report details how an under-the-radar company is helping a Chinese firm acquire sensitive U.S. technology. Waking up chained to a bed, finding liver and lung parts are missing. The first known survivor of forced organ harvesting in China is speaking out at a press event in Washington, D.C. A relationship broken by a global pandemic. Former President Trump spoke about the repercussions of the COVID-19 outbreak and his take on China.
I held him responsible for COVID. It broke up our relationship.
And a dramatic explosion strikes one of China's busiest seaports. The shockwaves afterward felt half a mile away. More details on what happened. A new report finds a Chinese organization is helping firms sanctioned by the U.S., allowing them to acquire cutting-edge technology. According to the New York Times, computer server provider Netflix sold equipment containing microchips to institutions tied to the Chinese military. Both the software and hardware reportedly came from companies like NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Intel. The report says Netflix's top executives once led a U.S.-sanctioned company called Sugon. The firm provided advanced chips to the Chinese military and the regime's internet censorship apparatus. It also created a surveillance system targeting ethnic and religious minorities. Netflix denied the accusations, saying that it didn't help Sugon bypass U.S. sanctions. In 2019, the company's founder was listed as one of 14 so-called outstanding Chinese Communist Party members. He reportedly led hundreds of former Sugon employees to create Netflix, hoping to keep access to American technology. Semiconductors have long been a flashpoint in U.S.-China relations. In 2022, Washington unveiled a comprehensive export control strategy, barring China from getting microchips and gear to produce them. The U.S. is banning imports from 5 more Chinese companies over alleged human rights abuses. The government says it's part of an effort to eliminate goods made with forced labor from the U.S. supply chain. The targeted companies were added to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act list. The law bans imports tied to what the U.S. says is an ongoing genocide of minorities in China's western Xinjiang region. The entity list now has over 70 companies listed. Most are tied to products like cotton clothing, automotive parts, vinyl flooring, and solar panels. U.S. officials say the Chinese regime has labor camps for Uyghurs and other Muslim minority groups in the Xinjiang region. The first known survivor of China's forced organ harvesting is breaking his silence. Chen Pei-ming is speaking publicly for the first time in Washington, D.C. NTD's Jack Bradley has more from the Friday press event.
Perhaps the first known survivor of the Chinese Communist Party's forced live organ harvesting campaign, a Falun Dafa practitioner in Washington, D.C., speaking out about how he had parts of his liver and lung forcibly removed while in China.
The reason I'm taking a stand today is because my friends who suffer persecution in prison in China can no longer make their voices heard. They've already passed away. We once promised each other whoever made it out alive would tell the truth to the public. My family members have been threatened. The CCP has employed a variety of tactics.
Pei-ming Chung said Chinese authorities forcibly removed his organs once in 2004 and again in 2006. Parts of his lung and liver are missing, which can be used for transplants in pediatric patients. Chung is targeted for forced organ harvesting by the Chinese regime because he practices Falun Gong, also called Falun Dafa, a spiritual practice with meditative exercises and moral teachings. The practice has been heavily persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party since 1999 because of its popularity. Chung is the first to share his story of surviving this method of persecution, forced live organ harvesting. He's been arrested 5 times and sentenced to over 8 years for his belief. He escaped when a prison guard fell asleep with the window open.
The government of China on the whole has said very little about forced organ harvesting. There's a tendency just to ignore it. The numbers of transplantations shot up way dramatically after the persecution of Falun Gong began.
It's a major problem, and it's one of those things like the story in in Sherlock Holmes. It's the dog that didn't bark. You're not hearing about it. It's big.
Worldwide, officials have for years been condemning the persecution of Falun Gong in China. And most recently, in the Senate, was introduced the Falun Gong Protection Act, which would sanction any individual involved in the Chinese regime's state-sanctioned forced live organ harvesting. A similar version of the bill passed the House back in June. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
A broken relationship prompted by a global pandemic. Former President Trump hosted a press conference at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida Thursday. He once again attributed the COVID-19 outbreak back to China. Here's the clip.
President Xi and I had a very good relationship until COVID, and I held him responsible for COVID. It broke up our relationship. We cannot have it where China is taking advantage of the United States, and that's what they were doing, as you very well know.
In the wake of a global COVID-19 outbreak, Trump repeatedly criticized China for its handling of the virus. While addressing the United Nations in 2020, Trump accused Beijing for allowing the spread of the virus by leaving international flights open. He said the communist regime also falsely stated that there is no evidence of human-to-human transmission. The COVID-19 pandemic claimed the lives of millions of Americans. During Trump's term as president, his administration issued a litany of actions targeting China's trade violations. That includes imposing a sweeping round of tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. Senator Tom Cotton is pushing the Department of Justice to check out schools that might be tied to the Chinese Communist regime. He's worried about Beijing's impact on U.S. education.
In a letter, Cotton and 7 other GOP senators said universities aren't disclosing their financial ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and that the lack of transparency could pose a national security risk. They noted that the University of Maryland and Stanford University paid fines for failing to disclose foreign funding, adding that undisclosed ties with the Chinese regime could lead to intellectual property theft, undue influence, and even espionage. Cotton also asked Attorney General Merrick Garland to evaluate the CCP's threat to American students and federal research. He wants Garland to outline the steps the Justice Department should take to safeguard the U.S. education system.
From abortion to religion to gun rights, the Justice Department recently found that video platform TikTok is gathering U.S. user data on sensitive social issues. How does this play into Beijing's campaign to influence young Americans? To discuss, we welcome Casey Fleming, CEO of Black Ops Partners Corporation. Right now is one of the most divided times among young people, with males becoming more conservative or slightly more conservative, while females are becoming more and more liberal. Now, on top of that, we're also seeing reports saying that TikTok is really honing in on hot button issues like how people associate or look at gun rights or abortion and all these other issues. How do you see that fitting into the future of America?
It's basically what you're talking about is social media, and as it's encompassed by cognitive warfare. That's the big picture piece of it. Above cognitive warfare, you've got unrestricted warfare. But it's all meant to weaken the United States and the free world and strengthen our enemies in the minds of our young people. So that's cognitive warfare at its finest. TikTok is at the top of that. Underneath cognitive warfare, there's a category called psychological warfare. So it messes with our kids' brains. It keeps them from thinking critically and questioning really what the truth really is behind the entire thing. And that's why family values are so critical. Raise our kids with extremely strong family values that we were all raised with, and make sure that they're airtight going forward so they can weather the storm. And it's not just TikTok. I mean, you've got other big tech companies like Facebook, with Instagram and Snapchat, other technologies as well. They all need to be held accountable, and they've proven that they cannot police themselves.
Given all of that, what would be the best way to counter this, expanding on one of your earlier points?
The best way to counter it is, number one, the best way to do it is stop all foreign influence into the United States. If you're caught allowing foreign influence or providing foreign influence, you can go to prison for treason and extreme fines as well. And secondly, hold our elected officials accountable. And if they are not on our team of protecting the United States and our future through our national security, then elect somebody in there who will do it, all three, state, federal, and local. The last thing is hold big tech accountable and say, you're not selling my data anymore. You're not profiting off of it, and you have to ask my permission, and I don't give my permission. So you need to think of a new business model. So it's time for each American need to understand that they are on the front lines of this war, and they need to act as individuals and act accordingly. The average American has an extreme amount of power. Write letters, go to town hall meetings, and voice these concerns and your position on your family, your national security, and don't take no for an answer.
Casey Fleming, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Lawmakers from at least 6 countries said Chinese diplomats were pressuring them not to attend a China-focused conference in Taiwan. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
An international group of lawmakers is criticizing the Chinese Communist Party after CCP representatives tried to stop legislators from attending a pro-democracy conference in Taiwan. Taiwan's Inter-Parliamentary Alliance, or IPAC, says the People's Republic of China used coercive measures to intimidate the delegates of at least 6 countries.
I'm not saying we have any intention to even think about toppling China, but when China pursues intentions to topple our democratic order, we fight back.
The IPAC is a group of hundreds of lawmakers from 35 countries working to counter the CCP's actions to subvert international order and democratic principles.
This regular conference that happens about democracy in Taiwan and the attempts by the CCP really to bully governments and individual representatives from going to this.
Politicians in Bolivia, Colombia, Slovakia, North Macedonia, Bosnia, and one Asian country that declined to be named said they were getting texts, calls, and urgent requests for meetings that would conflict with their plans to travel to Taipei.
And we heard reports from a number of countries, from particularly in Latin America and smaller European countries, about just a variety of tactics, everything from malware to very strong, off-the-record, threatening types of language.
They had over 50 delegates of the conference sign a statement condemning the actions.
Actually, it's a pretty shocking thing to be thinking that you might be a public servant or an academic in a foreign country, but the CCP knows who you are and is tracking you and your families.
The condemnation statement ends with, "We stand resolutely with our colleagues against the PRC's deplorable intimidation and call upon our governments to spare no effort in protecting the freedoms of their parliamentarians, upon which the health of our democracies depend." Sean Marshall, NTD News.
A dramatic explosion at one of the busiest ports in China Friday.
The blast happened on a cargo ship docked at the Ningbo Jushan port near Shanghai. The shockwaves could be felt half a mile away. According to Chinese state-run media, a container exploded on the ship, which was loaded with hazardous goods, and a surveillance camera caught the moment. The ship belongs to a Taiwanese company. It confirmed that the ship caught fire shortly after noontime while it was operating in the port. Chinese state-run media said no injuries have been reported. NTD cannot independently verify this due to the Chinese regime's history of underreporting casualties caused by accidents.
China announced the discovery of a large ultra-shallow gas field in the South China Sea. The field is named Ling Strait 36-1, southeast of Hainan Island, China's southernmost province. The China National Offshore Oil Corporation reported Wednesday that the location contains an estimated 3.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, the South China Sea holds an estimated 11 billion barrels of untapped oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. China's broad claims of sovereignty over the South China Sea have caused tensions with regional countries such as Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Those countries, plus a ruling from an international court in 2016, reject China's claims. Those countries also have their own maritime rights and interests in the waters. For years, the United States has maintained its stand to keep sea routes open and secure. It supports a binding code of conduct and other steps to build trust. At least one person is dead after flash floods strike northwestern China. According to Chinese state broadcaster CCTV on Friday, heavy rainfall has led to severe flooding in Shanxi province. Thousands have been evacuated. Hundreds of cars damaged or washed away. One video shared online shows the floodwaters turning a parking lot into a graveyard of submerged cars. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. China streets are buzzing with more than just the usual hum of traffic. Robo-taxis are now cruising through the country's cityscapes. As these self-driving cabs hit the road, China's millions of ride-hail drivers aren't pleased. A new alliance is taking shape in response to rising tensions in the Asia-Pacific region. Canada and Australia are ramping up their military cooperation to counter China's growing assertiveness. And Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida cancels plans to visit Central Asia. He's staying home amid a higher than usual risk of a major earthquake. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you soon.